What if history's two greatest empires faced one brutally unfair question? Which one was actually stronger? Not more famous, not more dramatic. Stronger. Rome with its stone roads, iron discipline, and obsession with order. Or the Ottomans, armed with cannons, bureaucracy, and 6 centuries of survival in a constantly changing world. The answer seems obvious at first. Rome built civilization itself. But once you dig into population, economics, military power, governance, and endurance, the truth becomes far more complicated and far more interesting. Defining strength before picking a winner. Before choosing sides, one thing must be clear. Strength is not a single statistic. An empire can be militarily dominant but economically fragile. It can control vast land yet struggle to govern it. Strength, in historical terms, usually means a combination of territorial control, population base, economic capacity, military effectiveness, state administration, and resilience over time. Rome and the Ottomans excelled in different combinations of these areas. Comparing them without defining strength first is like arguing whether a tank is stronger than a battleship. The context matters. When each empire reached its peak. For Rome, most historians point to the High Roman Empire, particularly during the reign of Emperor Trajan in the early 2nd century CE. This was when Rome reached its maximum territorial extent and enjoyed relative internal stability, strong institutions, and economic integration across the Mediterranean. For the Ottoman Empire, the peak is usually placed between the 16th and late 17th centuries, beginning with Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent and extending to the empire's greatest territorial reach before the failed siege of Vienna in 1683. This was the Ottoman Golden Age: military dominance, administrative sophistication, and control of key global trade routes. Already, the comparison becomes tricky. Rome ruled the ancient world. The Ottomans ruled an early modern gunpowder-driven world that was far more competitive and technologically volatile. Territorial power and geographic advantage. At its height, the Roman Empire controlled roughly 5 million square kilometers, wrapping almost completely around the Mediterranean Sea. This geography was Rome's secret weapon. The Mediterranean functioned as a massive internal highway, allowing grain, troops, messages, and money to move faster by ship than by land. Rome didn't just control land, it controlled circulation. The Ottoman Empire reached a similar territorial size, slightly exceeding Rome depending on how historians count vassal states and loosely governed regions. Ottoman lands stretched across southeastern Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of the Caucasus. This gave the Ottomans strategic dominance over 3 continents and access to some of the world's most valuable crossroads. In raw size, the two empires are remarkably close. The difference lies in cohesion. Rome's empire was geographically compact and internally connected. The Ottoman Empire was more sprawling, diverse, and unevenly governed. Rome's territory was easier to integrate. The Ottomans was harder to fully centralize. Rome's silent advantage. Population is power. More people mean more soldiers, more taxes, more production, and more resilience. At its peak, the Roman Empire governed somewhere between 70 and 100 million people, depending on the estimate used. Even conservative modern scholarship places Roman population around 60-75 million. This represented a significant portion of the entire world population at the time, concentrated in the most economically productive regions of Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. The Ottoman Empire, while immense, ruled a smaller population during its peak centuries. Early 16th century records suggest around 12 million inhabitants, with growth over time but never reaching Roman-era demographic dominance. Even by the early 20th century, Ottoman population estimates reach around 25 million, impressive, but still well below Rome's ancient demographic scale. This is one of Rome's strongest advantages. The Roman world sat at the center of ancient civilization when population density was highest. The Ottomans ruled during a more globally distributed demographic era, competing with massive populations in Europe, India, and China. Ancient giant versus early modern survivor. Measuring ancient economies is notoriously difficult, but historians broadly agree on one essential point: Rome commanded one of the most advanced and integrated economies the pre-industrial world had ever seen. This was not a loose collection of markets, but a deeply interconnected system held together by roads, ports, standardized coinage, and state-backed trade flows. Massive cities like Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, and Carthage acted as economic engines, pulling resources from thousands of miles away. Egyptian grain shipments alone fed hundreds of thousands of people in the capital, while North Africa became the empire's agricultural backbone. Spain supplied silver and metals, Asia Minor and Syria thrived as commercial hubs, and the Mediterranean functioned as a vast internal trade network that dramatically reduced transportation costs. Relative to the world it existed in, Rome's economy was immense. So large, in fact, that no rival in antiquity came close to matching its scale or level of coordination. Rome didn't just participate in the ancient economy, it defined it. The Ottoman economy existed in a very different and far less forgiving environment. The empire inherited control over some of the most valuable trade routes on Earth, linking Europe, Asia, and Africa through Istanbul, Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad. For centuries, this position generated enormous wealth and strategic leverage. However, the Ottomans faced a global economy that was changing rapidly. Atlantic trade routes bypassed traditional land corridors, European states developed new financial systems, and industrialization began reshaping production and military power. While the Ottoman Empire remained wealthy and commercially active, it increasingly had to compete rather than dominate. Economic strength became a matter of survival rather than supremacy. Rome ruled an economic world it largely controlled. The Ottomans operated within a harsher, faster-moving system that constantly challenged their position. Military power. Rome's military strength rested on one of history's most disciplined and standardized war machines. The Roman legion was not just a fighting force, it was an institution built for endurance. Soldiers trained relentlessly, fought in coordinated formations, and followed a strict command structure that emphasized cohesion over individual heroics. Rome maintained a professional standing army numbering in the hundreds of thousands, sustained by a centralized tax system, an extensive road network, and a permanent chain of forts and supply depots. Roman armies could march long distances, fight prolonged campaigns, build fortifications overnight, and recover from losses without collapsing. Just as importantly, Roman soldiers were engineers and administrators. Roads, bridges, aqueducts, and cities followed the legions, turning conquest into permanent control. Military power and state building were inseparable in the Roman system. The Ottoman military, by contrast, represented the cutting edge of early modern warfare. Where Rome mastered discipline and logistics, the Ottomans mastered firepower and adaptability. The Janissaries were among the world's first permanent salaried infantry forces equipped with firearms, directly loyal to the state rather than feudal lords. Ottoman artillery transformed warfare, making medieval walls obsolete and allowing the empire to capture even the most heavily fortified cities, including Constantinople in 1453. The empire combined infantry, cavalry, artillery, and naval forces into a flexible system capable of fighting on multiple fronts across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. If Rome represents the peak of ancient military organization, the Ottomans represent the peak of early modern military evolution. Each was nearly unstoppable within the rules of its own era. Governance and state capacity. Rome governed through law, citizenship, and assimilation. Over time, conquered elites became Roman elites. Roman law unified the empire. Local customs were tolerated, but the imperial system slowly absorbed provinces into a shared political identity. This produced long-term stability, but also rigidity. When Rome's institutions failed to adapt to new pressures, especially in the Western Empire, collapse followed. The Ottoman Empire governed differently. It ruled a multi-ethnic, multi-religious population through layered authority. Direct rule, semi-autonomous regions, religious communities, and vassal states all coexisted within the imperial structure. This flexibility allowed the Ottomans to manage diversity for centuries, but it also weakened central control over time. Rome sought unity. The Ottomans managed plurality, longevity, and resilience. The Roman Empire, depending on how it is defined, lasted between 500 and 1500 years. The Western Empire collapsed in the 5th century, but the Eastern Roman Empire survived as Byzantium until 1453. The Ottoman Empire lasted over 600 years, surviving technological revolutions, religious upheavals, economic shifts, and constant warfare. Few states in history have endured so long under such pressure. Longevity alone does not define strength, but resilience does. The Ottomans repeatedly reformed, adapted, and survived in a world that was changing faster than Rome's ever did. Rome ruled the ancient world through unity and discipline. The Ottomans survived centuries by adapting to constant change. If this comparison made you see history differently, like and subscribe. And if you want to be smarter every day, like and subscribe.